look who's joining us. Albert Breer, our good buddy, the senior NFL reporter, lead content strategist. He's the Monday morning quarterback. He joins us on the program. Albert got singled out by Odell Beckham last night, where I had the audacity of saying, is he going to be able to play? Like, when is he going to be able to play? Why hasn't he signed? And you had the information leaked to Ed Werder by the Cowboys hours later that said, hey, we got some questions about, him taking a physical. Where do we stand with Odell Beckham actually being able to play this year?
Well, I think like when we've talked about like where the free agency tour is with him, we've sort of neglected how important the physical is as a part of that for all the teams that are involved, the Bills, the Giants, the Cowboys. And the reason why is because his surgery more or less in 2020 was botched. The one that he had while he was still with the Browns. And
I thought every surgery is successful surgery.
Yeah, well, they are the immediate aftermath. Then you don't hear much. You hear it was successful a couple of days later, and then you never hear about it again.
Why would the Cowboys leak this, Albert?
I mean, I don't think it was leaked. Like, I mean, Ed's a good reporter. He's been around that team forever, so Ed's got a good way of getting information. And I think for certain people in the Cowboys, it's maybe an explanation. Hey, like, here's where we're not being cheap. Like, here's why we're maybe not willing to go to a certain extent to get him. And this kind of like goes back to where they were in 2020. And I don't know how many people know this, Dan, but like last year, I had people with the Rams tell me that like if it had been August and they had that like they had had that physical in front of them, like they wouldn't have signed him because they wouldn't have thought he would have been able to make it through the year. And they basically looked at it because it was, I think, November at that point, and said to themselves, okay, can we make it through the end of the year without his knee exploding on us? Because they thought it was a ticking time bomb. The Rams did. And, Odell sort of understood where it was at too. And there was sort of this unspoken agreement. We're going to do our best to get you to the finish line. And they almost made it. Then now eventually that ticking time bomb went off. But certainly because of that, and there is a feeling that, his last surgery, which I believe was done by Neil Elatrash, who's the Rams team doctor, was more successful. There are obviously still going to be questions. It's 2 surgeries on the same knee in a short period of time. The last surgery wasn't all that successful. And so, I think for each of these teams, the physical is an important piece of these visits. It's not just going to a basketball game or getting to see the weight room. Like, the physical is the important piece of it for these teams. And so, I think that it's not like completely shocking that you might hear this out of one of these teams. Now, I mean, like, look, like these aren't black and white all the time, and sometimes one team will see things a little bit differently than the next. So just because the Cowboys had their concerns, and they did, Ed's right on that, doesn't mean that the Bills and Giants see it the same way.
Okay, but when's he going to play? Why isn't he on a team right now?
I think there are a couple of reasons why. Like, I think, part of it is him. Like, I think a big part of it, like, he could have probably gotten a contract earlier in the year. I think he wanted to remain patient with it, for reasons that are actually like really apparent with what happened to his old team, right? Like 3 months ago, we were talking about him potentially going back to the Rams. Like, that would have looked silly now, right? So I think in a certain way, Dan, it was smart of him to wait because it allowed, I mean, what was he going to gain by signing with the team in September or October and saying, okay, I'm going to go rehab with you. I'm going to move to your city. I'm going to rehab with you. I mean, yeah, you probably get a head start in the playbook, but like what happened with the Rams with Stafford and Donald and Kupp getting hurt could happen. And now all of a sudden you're playing out the string with a team that's not contending. So I think that part of the strategy for Odell actually worked out, where you've got a more complete picture of where all these teams are and who's contending and who's not. Even the Giants, like the Giants don't look the same as they looked a month ago, right? So I think that was a piece of it. And, I think that really like what Odell, and this is like every indication I've gotten from the last like 3 or 4 months, is like Odell really like was affected by what happened with the Rams last year, and that, the perception of Odell changed. I think over the couple months that he was on that team, like when he went there, he was a malcontent. There was the stuff with his dad, the ugly exit from Cleveland and all of that.
Yeah.
And he goes to a winning situation and, getting to a Super Bowl and starring in the playoffs, perception on him changed completely. And so he got a real life example of what winning can do for a player and how winning can change a player's value. And so, I think he knows if he wants to launch like another phase of his career here, the best chance to do it is going to be going to the place that gives them the best chance to win. And, right now, I think looking at it, you can see that's why a team like Buffalo would be in the mix. The Giants maybe less so, and obviously the Cowboys are in a really good position to win now too.
Yeah, I mean, the Cowboys are a good team. They're a talented offensive team. Everybody knew that. Nothing has changed with them. And with Buffalo, they were the Super Bowl favorite. He could have gone to Buffalo 2 months ago. Nothing's changed. Buffalo, maybe they took the dip, but they're still one of the favorites there. I'm just curious when he signs and if he can play this year.
Right. And I think like the main thing, whoever signs him, it's going to, and I think he will be able to play, but I think the main thing is what can we do to have him in position to play in the playoffs? That's why, like you look at the Giants, and if the Giants were to sign him, I think this would be more about 2023.
Sure.
Like we need to have like somebody in that receiver room in 2023. Because they're no sure thing to make the playoffs at all now. Like they're half a game out of last place in the NFC East, as good as that division's been. So, I think if you're Buffalo, you bring him in. Your thought is, how can we get him in position where he can play 60, 70% of the snaps in the playoffs for us and make a difference and be somebody who can take the pressure off of Stephon Diggs and complement Gabe Davis. And so, I think like for whoever signs him, and the Cowboys included in this, obviously with the concerns they have, I think you'd even put them more so in this category. Like you want to have them in position to help you compete for a championship. And if you're signing a guy this late in the year, that's the only reason you're doing it. So yeah, like it'd be great to see him at some point in December, January to know what you have. But really the goal would be to have him be a factor in the playoffs. And then, whatever happens after that, I think is a bonus.
Yeah, I would have thought he would have gotten on a roster, rehab with the team, ingratiate himself to the team, and start getting paychecks there to be ready for this postseason run. We're talking to Albert Breer. He is the Monday morning quarterback. When Baker Mayfield asked to be released, put on waivers by Carolina, what do you think he thought was going to happen?
So, my understanding is this was all really cordial, and it just, it didn't work out. He went in and saw the general manager, Scott Fitter. They talked it out. They agreed to release him. The Panthers saved $1.4 million here. I think I have to think like he thought like maybe I wind up in San Francisco. Like that's the most logical thing. Now he's going to go to LA and he's going to say how happy he is to be there. And I'm sure he is. And, the chance to play even a month with Sean McVay as your offensive play caller, there could be benefit in that and sort of rejuvenating his stock going into 2023. Absolutely 100%. But the timing of it, seems pretty obvious, he has background in that offense in both the LA and San Francisco offense, and that the offense he played in Cleveland under Kevin Stefanski is Gary Kubiak's offense, and Gary Kubiak's Kyle Shanahan's mentor. And, I think you look at the opportunity to compete for a championship, it would have been there in San Francisco. And my understanding is I talked to some people there last night. San Francisco wasn't that interested. Like, I don't know if they would have signed him even if he had cleared waivers. And they did their homework. They went back and looked at the tape. They thought the tape wasn't very good for whatever it's worth. So I don't think this was a huge consideration for San Francisco at the end of the day, based on what Baker Mayfield has put on tape over the last 2 years. So maybe he thought that the opportunity to go to San Francisco might be out there for him. But the reality of it, I think now becomes he's got to take whatever he was going to have to take whatever chance he had to rejuvenate his career and to kind of try to reestablish his stock going into 2023. And because of the injury situation in LA and because of the coaching staff that's there, Sean McVay primary among those coaches, I think it actually gives him a pretty good opportunity to do that.
Oh, he might start tomorrow night, which is crazy.
Yeah.
I think it's a good move for the Rams because it doesn't cost them anything. A seventh-round pick. And maybe you found your starter. I wonder Matthew Stafford's playing his status, not just this season where he's not going to play,
right.
but further here.
No, I mean, I think it's fair. The people I've talked to, no one thinks Matthew Stafford is going to be one of these guys who hangs around into his 40s. Now, it doesn't mean he's going to retire
Yeah.
in 5 weeks. But I think he's somebody who won't when it's time, he'll know and he'll walk away. And maybe the concussion going through that, over the last few weeks. And obviously there was another concussion scare after the first concussion. Maybe that's enough. He's got his ring, he's got his money, who knows, I think it's something the Rams certainly have to take into account. And, this is a worthy swing, a guy who was a first overall pick, a guy who got a team to the playoffs. I think if you're the Rams, you look at it and you say, just in case Matthew Stafford has second thoughts about coming back in 2023, this can be our first swing at finding our next quarterback. And here's the other part of it too, Dan. I mean, I think the rest of the year for the Rams has to be about evaluating the rest of the roster. The silver lining in all of this is they're going to get a clean look at the rest of the roster and what it looks like without those star players in there. I think Baker Mayfield probably gives them a better chance to get a clean look at what the offensive linemen look like, what the receivers look like, what the young running backs look like, what all those guys look like. And, probably gives them a better chance to assess who those guys are going into 2023.
Sean McVay gets a hall pass this year. Does he get another hall pass with this kind of season?
What do you mean? Like for next year, you mean?
Yeah. Could he put himself in trouble?
No. I mean, 5 winning seasons in a row for a franchise that was, dead as any franchise.
But that they're not built for the future.
Yeah, I mean, I've said this to you before, Dan. I don't think he's rebuilding. I don't think he's gonna be there for the rebuild. So I've said that to you before. I think
so by choice.
I personally think I think if Cooper Kupp and Aaron Donald and Matthew Stafford are all in for 2023 or 2024, whatever it is, I think Sean will be there with them. I think when those guys walk away, when that core of players walks away, I think that there's the natural opportunity for Sean to step back. And Sean's been vocal about it too, whenever that time comes, that could be the time when,
well, they're throwing that kind of money out. And if he's looking at what these other analysts are making and you could pony up,
I just think it's he's talked openly about wanting to start a family and wanting to take a break and get a breather and all the rest of it. It's just they're eventually that core of players, those 4 guys that we've talked about in the past, and eventually those guys are going to walk away, and that's going to create a natural point for him to walk away too. And I wrote this back in July. I felt this way in July. I think he has 1 to 5 years left with the Rams. And, when I wrote that, I said 1 to 5 years, including this year.
Yeah.
So nothing would surprise me.
I'll leave you with this. You don't have GMs get fired during the season, but the Titans fired John Robinson.
Yeah.
What was this? They just give him a contract extension?
Yeah, it's weird. They gave him an extension through 2027 back in February, I think it was. The way it was described to me is similar to the Mike Mularkey firing. And if you remember that, they fired Mike Mularkey, I'm not saying he's Vince Lombardi, but he went 9-7 2 years in a row in his only 2 years as the head coach there, and they fired him. And, Amy Adams Strunk, their owner, I think felt like at the time, good isn't good enough. We want to level up. And so they went and hired Mike Vrabel. And that's the explanation I got on this, was that good's not good enough. I don't think anybody misses the coincidence here. I don't think anybody thinks it's a coincidence here that it happened right after A.J. Brown, who he traded away, lit them up. I'm allowing for the fact that there could be some more here too. And I don't know exactly what that is because the timing does seem a little weird to me.
Yeah.
But the information I have right now is it's that whole good isn't good enough thing. And I think now it'll be interesting to see where they go, because I think Mike Vrabel, at this point, is the most valuable person in that organization. And so who does he see as the ideal general manager? What does he see as the ideal structure? I think that those are the operative questions now. Look, I think John Robinson did a lot of good things. He drafted Jeffrey Simmons. He drafted Derrick Henry. He drafted Kevin Byard, drafted, A.J. Brown, despite trading him away 4 years later. So he did a lot of good things within that organization. But I think what cost him here is there's not like a long-term answer at quarterback still, and then some of the high-profile strikeouts on first-round picks from, Corey Davis to the big one, Isaiah Wilson to Rashawn Evans, like they haven't done as well in the first round. And so there's been a lot of good, some bad with John Robinson. And I think the decision here was we want to be great. And what we are right now is just good.
You're great. Thank you, Albert. Great to talk to you again, buddy.
All right. Thanks, Dan.
That's Albert Breer. He's the Monday morning quarterback.